Thanks, Cole. And thanks everyone in attendance for joining our conversation today about optimizing content for online audiences. To start, it's important to understand how people read online and consider why they come to our websites in the first place. A 2018 Pew Research study says 77% of Americans access the internet each day, and a quarter of those say that they're almost constantly online. We're motivated to go online to complete specific tasks, including accessing products and services and making purchases, choosing entertainment when and where we want it, connecting with family and friends, exploring new subjects, finding locations when we're out and about, and sharing our experiences. So there's one common theme that ties these tasks together, and that's that they're all action-oriented. In each case, we're going online because we want to solve a problem or complete a specific task. Here's a quote I really like from user experience expert Jerry McGovern, who says that when it comes to developing content for your website, one of the most important things to remember is that nobody cares about information for its own sake. The customer has a task and they want to complete it, and they have a problem that they want to solve. That's just as true with hospital or health system websites as it is with any other business or organization. When they land on your website, users already have a specific task in mind. Today, almost 80% of online health research begins at a search engine such as Google, Bing, or Yahoo. In adults 65 and older, the segment of the U.S. population that's most likely to personally need a wide range of healthcare services, they're increasingly becoming more comfortable using technology and turning to digital health resources. It's our job as web writers to help them accomplish the task that they're there to do by clearly communicating the information that they're looking for. So what type of health information specifically are users looking for online? Mostly, we're looking for information about specific conditions and symptoms or specific treatments. Other topics include communicating with healthcare providers and researching exercise and diet plans. A 2017 study found that 33% of people look up reviews of doctors online, which is up from about 1/4 of respondents, which was from a study recorded in 2014. So when users land on our pages, what do they see? How are they consuming the information that we provide? Studies show us that people don't read web pages the same way that they would read a print publication. And that's because when we're online, we're scanning the screen, looking for the information that's most relevant to us or answers our questions. Eye tracking studies reveal that visitors consistently look at web pages using certain patterns. One of those patterns is commonly known as the F pattern. In the classic F-shaped pattern, readers scan the main headline and then skim content that grabs their attention, such as headings and the first line of a paragraph or bulleted lists. Then, their eyes scan down the left edge of the content. Another example, my personal favorite, is the layer cake pattern, which happens when eyes scan headings and subheadings without reading the content below. And you'll see here that a heat map or gaze plot of this pattern shows horizontal lines similar to the alternating layers of frosting and cake in a layer cake. Some further examples of eye tracking patterns include the spotted pattern, where readers skip large amounts of text and scan to find something specific, such as certain words, links, or numbers. The marking pattern, where the eyes stay focused in one place and then the user scrolls or swipes along the page. And that pattern we see is more common on mobile devices than desktop. Another pattern is called the bypassing pattern, which happens when multiple lines of text in a list start with the same word, so readers skip those words and just read the following copy. And then finally, another example of a pattern is the commitment pattern, where a user who is highly interested in content reads almost everything on the page. But I'm about to tell you that that's not very common. So as a writer, this is the slide in my presentation that really breaks my heart. But as someone who reads online every day, I know that this is true. So most of the time, the majority of our content won't be read. Usability expert Jacob Nielsen says that on average, users only have time to read at most 28% of the words during an average visit. But that's okay. When you follow our steps for great web writing, you'll help your users find that 20% of content, 20 to 28% of content that they're most interested in. And that's the content that helps them accomplish the task that brought them to your website in the first place. And that drives conversions that support your business goals. Best practice for web writing really boils down to just 3 major items. Keep it simple and scannable, focus on the user, and make it easy to take action. It sounds easy when you just see this 3-bulleted list, but all of these best practices really take a lot of thought, effort, and practice to do well. Let's start with step 1, keeping your writing simple and easy to scan. So simple, concise writing benefits everyone, including people who are reading on their smartphones, or perhaps those who use screen readers or other assistive devices. Simplicity is especially important for users who have weak levels of health literacy. Only about 1 in 10 adults is considered wholly proficient when it comes to health literacy, and that percentage is even lower among older adults, those who are 65 and older. Even people with strong literacy skills can face challenges obtaining, processing, and understanding health information when they're faced with a serious illness or unfamiliar medical terms, or perhaps they're trying to interpret information in order to make a healthcare choice. And patients from all levels of health literacy depend on the internet to help them make decisions about their care. So that means if we want the majority of our website visitors to understand us, we need to avoid jargon, speak plainly, and explain any healthcare-specific technical terms and acronyms. This approach can also help you keep your content compliant with standards for accessibility, which is something we'll dive into in depth later in this conversation. So this list shows common problems that people with weak health literacy skills may face. You could see that it may be hard for them to manage chronic illnesses, measure their medications and take them as directed, understand nutrition labels, tasks that require reading and math skills. It may be difficult for them to navigate the healthcare system or understand their diagnosis and treatment options. It may also be difficult for them to understand how the choices they make related to diet and exercise can affect their health. So it's our job as communicators to bridge that gap and keep these things top of mind. I'd like to share an online tool that you can use to understand your target audience and determine the grade reading level that will support their understanding of the site's content. And that's the University of North Carolina Chapel Hill's Health Literacy Data Map. So this is a map that displays the most recent data about health literacy that's available, and it ranks health literacy competency by quartile, with 4, bright green, being the highest, and quartile 1, red, as the lowest. And as you can see from this map of the United States, health literacy levels really vary across the range of proficiency throughout the country. One thing that I love about this map is that you can gain a deeper understanding about your audience, drilling down to the counties actually that your organization serves. And then once you know the health literacy proficiency in your area, you can set the grade level readability goal for your content accordingly. Most newspapers in the country set theirs at 8th grade, and Nielsen Norman Group recommends that the content is written no higher than at a 10th grade level, even if you're speaking to experts. But of course, the grade level that's best for your content really depends on your actual audience. This also relates to making your site accessible. As healthcare writers, we often encounter medical jargon and academic language, and that's because we rely on doctors to share their subject matter expertise. It's our job to learn their language and then simplify it for a patient audience on the web. Here's one example from a recent project here at Geonetric. The phrases from the column on the left all come from service line content that we rewrote for a client. You'll see that we replaced medical phrases to more familiar language, such as saying blocks blood flow instead of obstructs circulation. And we also simplified copy by using more concise and conversational phrases. For example, saying doesn't use, which uses contractions, instead of does not require the use of. It's important to keep your text clear, concise, straightforward, and lively by using the active voice as much as possible. With the active voice, the subject performs an action. The nurse called the patient. Here, the nurse is the subject, and she's performing the action, or he. They're calling the patient. On the flip side, with a passive voice, the subject is acted upon by the verb. So the patient was called by the nurse. Here, patient is the subject, but the subject isn't doing anything. They're just receiving the action, which is the call. So in this case, it's pretty easy to understand the instance of passive voice, but sometimes it can be vague or awkward, and it can also make your copy very wordy. So switching to an active voice can help you tighten up your writing. Here's another great tool you can access. It's an app that highlights lengthy and complex sentences and common errors. So if you see a red or yellow highlight, that means your sentence is too dense and complicated. Purple highlights show the places where the app is suggesting a simpler word alternative. Green spots are instances of passive voice, and blue highlight shows the use of adverbs. The app won't tell you how to fix long sentences or what to do with adverbs or how to correct passive voice, but it really gives you a great place to start. So, additionally, the tool will give you a readability grade level. As you make updates to the highlighted text, you'll probably notice that grade level go down, which is great. Good web copy has a lot in common with good news writing. It gets to the point quickly by using the inverted pyramid. With this communication style, you start with a concise summary of the most important information, and then you provide supporting details below in order of their importance. Let's look at an example of how this could work in a healthcare service line page. This is a page about thyroid cancer treatment. We lead the page with the most important thing that we want our audience, prospective patients and their families, to know, that this hospital offers expert, multidisciplinary care to help achieve the best possible health outcome. You could also think of this as the conclusion that you want your readers to come to after they've read the rest of the page. Then, underneath, you'll see the information that supports that conclusion, in order of importance and corresponding to the patient journey. It's details about how the team works together to provide care, information about specific treatments they offer, and an explanation of rehabilitation programs and follow-up care. This hierarchy also works to create a more accessible experience because it uses headings to organize content on the page. And as I noted earlier, that's something that we'll dive into in depth later on in this presentation. Simplicity on the web is about more than just the words you use. It's also about format and structure. So use a page structure that supports scanning or skimming because as we learned earlier, we know that people who are going online, they just want to find specific information. And we want to make it as easy as possible for them to find what they're looking for. So to do that, please follow these best practices, which are to cover one topic per page, keep your paragraph short, use bulleted and numbered lists to break out a series of information, include straightforward headings and subheads that tell your reader what type of information they can expect to read, and write in short sentences. Here's a page that Geonetric rewrote as part of a large content development project for a client. Right now, it's mostly just a series of blobs of text. The headline stands out, so you know what service this page is about, but you have to really sit down and read line by line, word by word to discover what are the topics that are really covered on this page. Those topics are what's low vision, what causes low vision, rehabilitation program services that are available, and then recommendations for getting an eye evaluation. So our goal at Geonetric was to make it easier for users to scan this page and then find the topics more quickly. On the right of the screen, you'll see the new content that we created for this client. There's not much new information, it's just broken into smaller chunks based on those subtopics that we identified earlier. We added subheads so that the user can quickly see what information is covered on this page and then zero in on what's most important to them. We kept the sentences and paragraphs short, in part by breaking out lists of symptoms and conditions into bulleted lists. Finally, we moved the information about the need to first see a doctor for an eye evaluation into a call-out box so it stood out more clearly. We also added a link to the client's list of ophthalmologists to make it easy for the user to find a doctor within this health system. If you take the time to closely read through this copy, you'll notice that we shifted from a passive voice to an active one. We also began directly addressing the user using the word you instead of using the third person, and that's part of our second step. Step 2 is to focus on the user. Start by defining who your audience is. In most cases, if you're writing for a hospital or healthcare website, your primary audience would be patients and their families. But there may be some sections of your site that are aimed at other groups. The audience for your career section, for example, would be job seekers. Once you've identified the audience for the page or section you're writing, take a minute to visualize them and consider, what do they want to know? What questions might they be seeking answers for? How will your service or product make your user's life better or easier? What would make them want to choose you instead of the clinic down the street? And what's the next action that they should take after reading the page? Do you want them to make an appointment, register for a class? What's the end goal that you and they are moving towards? Keep the answers to these questions at top of mind as you begin writing the text for your page. Remember, this page isn't for you or your organization, it's for your users. So speak to them, not at them, as if you're having a conversation. So if a patient or a patient's family member walked into your office or called you on the phone, you would address them directly. You'd use the word you instead of the patient. So do the same thing in your web writing. Write to the one person who is reading the web page, not to a nameless crowd. Anticipate your users' questions or concerns and then address them in your writing. Make your web page text warm and conversational, so write like you talk. That means using all of the techniques that we talked about earlier for keeping it simple, such as writing short sentences, using contractions, and other everyday words. Remember, in some cases, you are writing for someone who is going through a difficult time. They've just had a medical diagnosis, they're facing a treatment, so it's important to be sensitive to their concerns. Avoid labeling them and be empathetic. Finally, focus on the benefits of your services or facilities, not the features. Your web pages shouldn't focus on what you offer, but instead focus on how your users can benefit from what you offer. Here's another quote that I really like from digital marketing and content expert Ann Handley. And I think it just underscores the need to see your user as people. We're all just people trying to write to other people. So keep that in mind. Worry less about sounding professional and worry more about creating content that other people can relate to. Finally, make it easy to take action. You publish this webpage for a reason, and you want your user to do something after they read it. On every page, you should include a single, strong call to action that directs the user on what to do next and prompts an immediate response. The best calls to action are clear and concise. They're displayed prominently, even on a mobile device, so that the audience sees that call to action when they're scanning the page, and it's relevant to that specific page and its audience. Finally, whenever possible, choose a call to action that you can track, and that helps you measure the effectiveness of your page so you can make adjustments as needed to improve your site's performance. Use active words to make your calls to action more effective. Encourage visitors to take the next step by using verbs such as register now, enroll, sign up, and learn more. If possible, it's best to let your user take action online. So if a user initiates contact with your organization on the website, they most likely want to complete tasks such as scheduling appointments, viewing their medical test results, paying their bills, completing and submitting medical forms. They want to do those tasks online. Don't make them pick up the phone to take action unless that activity meets your goals and theirs. So now that we've covered the 3 best practices for web writing, keeping it simple and scannable, focusing on the user, and making it easy to take action, let's go ahead and shift gears a bit and talk about the connection between content and search engine optimization. Google has long insisted that good SEO comes from great content that meets the needs of users. Of course, you must also use effective HTML page titles, meta descriptions, alt text, and SEO-friendly URLs, but in the end, the true driver of your search engine ranking is going to be the quality of your page content. On average, about 51% of website traffic is organic traffic. That is, visitors who come to your website as a result of unpaid search results. That means you're not just writing for the users who are already on your site, you're also writing for the users who are trying to find you via Google and other search engines. When Google is ranking a web page, it looks at the quality of the content, whether there are links to and from that web page, localization or how relevant your content is to local searches, as well as user engagement. So are users clicking on the page when it's listed in search results? And then once they're on that page, what does their behavior look like? What keeps users on that page? What brings them to your site to learn or take action? So search engines appreciate when content answers user questions, incorporates keywords effectively and in context. They appreciate content that's well written and regularly updated or fresh, content that offers value, that provides original and useful information, and then uses headings, again, to provide structure and context. Search engines do not care for duplicate or plagiarized content. The practice of keyword stuffing, which means using irrelevant keywords or repeating them in the same words or phrases in an unnatural sounding way. They don't appreciate lack of or improper page structure, and they don't care for thin, non-meaningful content, such as coming soon notices. They really like content that's been fleshed out. Most searches for healthcare or providers are tailored to a certain geographic area. Help your site appear in local searches by including keywords in your service line content that's relevant to your geographic service area. So examples could include relevant cities, counties, the state, location names, and other local regions that people might be putting into their Google search bar along with a service line keyword. And you can take this a step further when you're writing a location profile by noting the address or phone numbers and local landmarks or wayfinding terms that would be helpful for a user who's trying to find or learn about a specific location. It all comes down to this. You should write content that gives your users what they want, and then the search engines will help them find you. If you have content that meets the needs of a searcher, the chances are pretty good that you'll show up in search engine result pages. But we can help search engines better understand what's on our page and how it answers those user questions with just a few simple techniques. One of those is your use of keywords, which can, of course, impact your rankings. To use keywords well, incorporate them naturally in context and as part of high-quality content that provides value to your users. Google gives more weight to keywords that are used in certain areas of your website, so as much as possible, work your keywords into your HTML page title, meta description, headings, image titles and alt text, URL address, and link anchor text. And I'll go into more detail and provide some definitions to these terms over the next few slides. So HTML page titles, also known as title tags, define a title in the browser toolbar and in social media, and they provide a title for the page when it's added to favorites. It can also make a page more accessible as long as it's written well. And here you can see examples of those HTML page titles pulled from actual web pages. When you're writing an HTML page title, be concise. Try to keep it to 60 to 70 characters or less, which includes spaces. If that title's too long, search engines will show an ellipsis to indicate that a title tag has been cut off. And if you can, place important keywords closer to the start of the title. Industry testing shows that this helps with your search ranking as well as your click-through rates. And here on this slide, you'll see a formula that can help you get started. All right, let's talk about page descriptions, which is a snippet that summarizes a page's content. Google tells us that it doesn't look at the actual page descriptions when determining rankings. However, it does factor into user behavior. That includes click-through rates. And one of the best ways to improve your click-through rate is to write effective meta descriptions. It also includes bounce rate, which is the percentage of sessions where a visitor leaves your site without interacting with the page. Google considers fast bouncing a sign that the page isn't giving users the information that they're looking for. Good page descriptions tell your users what to expect from a web page, which can cause your bounce rate to go down, and that in turn helps your SEO. So, how do you write a good page description? Here's some best practices for when you do sit down to write those. So, it's important to know that Google may penalize you if you mass duplicate your meta descriptions. They should all be unique. Be concise, or Google will cut them off. They should be compelling, relevant, readable copy that would make sense out of context. So you can kind of think of the meta description as an advertisement for your web page. And when appropriate, you can write a description that invites a response or piques the reader's curiosity to make them want to click through. You can test your meta description using an online tool provided by Moz, and it lets you input your meta description and then preview it. So writing meta descriptions, they won't take that long to do, but it's really worth that time. If you don't write a meta description, Google will just pull text from your page, and usually they'll take the first sentence or a combination of the headings and paragraphs. Other times, the description that it pulls will depend on the search terms that were used. So you can see here, this is an example of what happened to one of our clients before we revamped their content. Because this page didn't have a page description in the metadata, Google pulled the first text it found and displayed that on the search results page instead. So as you can see on a web page about this health system and their services, the meta description talked about community education services that they provided. So that was really a lost opportunity for them to highlight their care. Keep in mind that even if you write a page description, Google can still pick out text from the web page for its search results if it thinks that that text is more relevant to searchers. So bottom line, the better you write your page content and your descriptions, the more likely it is that Google will use what you created. Here's a helpful meta description formula you can use to get started with your own meta descriptions. You'll see the formula follows some type of action, again, written in that user-focused way, paired with the name of your organization, the city or state you're targeting, and then how your user benefits from that specific service or treatment. We also have some tips for URL structuring. So your URLs should be simple, direct, descriptive, and easy to read. Use relevant keywords, but you don't need to repeat them. Remove stop words such as and, or, but, or the, in order to keep the URL as concise as possible. But I do want to note that it's okay to use stop words in a URL if they're part of a location name or your branding. For example, if you have a location called The Cancer Center, and that's the name of it in all of your branding, it's okay to have that the in the URL title, even though the is a stop word. And we also recommend using hyphens when you're separating words instead of underscores or spaces. So link anchor text, that's the clickable text in a hyperlink. And it's the text that search engines and site visitors use to understand where a link will take them when they click on it. We recommend being descriptive. Resist the urge to use click here or read more. Write the link to describe the subject of the link to page, document, or site. And this is especially important to follow in order to have an accessible web experience. Anchor text with targeted keywords improve your search engine ranking, generate more web traffic, and then results in better content because you have to think more carefully about what you write and how you create links. It also helps users trust your site because they actually get what they expect to find when they click on a link. A great test of your link text is to read it out of context and see if it still makes sense. If it does, then visitors and search engines both should be able to look at it and have some idea of where they're headed when they click. Keep in mind that some screen readers will present the links to users out of context, so this is especially important. So we've mentioned accessibility considerations a few times, and now we're going to talk a little bit more about other considerations that you should be making in your content to make sure that it's accessible as possible. So what is accessibility? Web accessibility means providing equal access to your web properties for all individuals, including those with disabilities. More specifically, it means that you've built and maintained these online tools so that people with disabilities can perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with them. A comprehensive approach to web accessibility considers all disabilities that may affect access to the web, including visual, auditory, physical, speech, cognitive, and neurological disabilities. And there are 3 levels of requirements that pertain to accessibility. Those would be A, AA, and AAA, with A being the lowest and AAA being the highest level of accessibility. So why is accessibility important? For one thing, lawsuits. The risk of legal liability is something that we hear from our clients quite often that is a driving force for why accessibility increasingly is becoming more important. It's more of a priority. But overall, ultimately, making your site accessible is just the right thing to do for your patients, prospective patients, employees, and your community. Much of what we've already covered in this training will help you create accessible content. So let's go over some of the ways that content and accessibility interact. So as noted, if you follow the guidelines that we've laid out, you should be in good shape. But here are some of the specific items to keep an eye on when you review your content for accessibility standards. So I mentioned that A, AA, and AAA level. That is related to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, which is a federal guideline that states content should be written as clearly and simply as possible. And to meet that high gold level standard, the content should register at a 9th grade reading level or lower. Similar to the earlier recommendation we made about making content easy for a layperson to understand, you'll want to explain abbreviations, technical terms, and jargon on the first reference. Use descriptive text for links. Never use click here because that could be misleading to someone who's using an assistive device like a screen reader to understand the content that's on the page. And then, of course, keep the content within a clear and understandable hierarchy using headings and subheadings to organize the content. So not only are those headings going to make your content more scannable for your user, you're going to have a better user experience. It's also going to benefit your SEO because Google understands better what's on that page because it's reading the headings. On top of that, it makes your site more accessible. So it's a great principle to follow. Further recommendations are to not refer to content using sensory wording, for example, see below, including captions for videos, and following guidelines set by the federal government for making your PDFs and other files accessible. And then we ask that you don't embed text and images. To conclude, Geometric has a wide range of content resources that you can use to guide your content development and strategy, from blog posts to ebooks to white papers.